Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. So on today's video, I'm going to help you understand that what will happen if US defaults on its debt, what would be the implication on the world, and more specifically, what would be the implication on you? Is there something that you can do? So there are specific 5 central points that I will discuss about. It will help you understand a lot of history, economics, investment, all things combined. One humble request that if you like these type of videos where I'm interrelating all these stuff, do press the like button. It would help these type of videos reach out to more people. It would act as an indicator that you would want me to make these type of macro videos. So very quick historic context first, that back in the year 1557, if we consider the modern day, so to say, then Spain became the first country to default on its debt. Since then, Spain has roughly defaulted around 15 times on its debt. There are other Latin American countries, there are African countries, there are countries like Mexico, Russia, they have all defaulted on their debt. Interestingly, in the year 1840, US also defaulted on its debt. What was the reason for that? Well, the reason was that they built too much infrastructure too fast, especially canals, and they defaulted on their debt and it became a big problem for them. But post World War II, the US rose in economic prominence, and since then it has never defaulted on its debt. Now in the year 2023, talks are going on that US will be unable to increase its debt ceiling. Therefore, it will default on its debt and it will be catastrophic for the entire world. So let's understand this topic more deeply, and this video has been sponsored by Tax Buddy. So I'm sure that you know that the tax filing season is underway, and there is a lot of confusion going on that whether you should pick old regime or new regime, because there are so many changes that are happening and you won't even think about filing your taxes until July. But Tax Buddy has agreed to provide a massive 40% discount to people who are watching this video. So you can check the links in the description and comment box, and by using those links, you can file your ITR. This offer is only valid till 31st of May. So back to the video, and the first major thing that will happen if the US defaults on its debt is that the US debt market is going to collapse, and it will take with it a bunch of international debt markets. Now, what do I mean by here? Let me show you some data and facts. So take a look at this graphic. This graphic talks about the total debt that the US has. So US in total has roughly $31 trillion of debt. Now, who holds this $31 trillion of debt? So the first key part is that foreign holdings own approximately $9 trillion of debt. Now, most of the US debt is held domestically. So this makes up approximately 11 to 12 trillion dollars. And then the US government also maintains reserves. For example, the Indian government also maintain reserves. Reserve simply means that you can imagine it to be a tijori, and the government holds a lot of currencies. For example, the Indian government also holds its tijori, which is called as Indian Forex. And in that tijori, a lot of stuff is kept. For example, gold is kept, US dollar is kept, vagera vagera. Similarly, the US government also maintains a reserve, and in that they hold a lot of US dollars. So approximately in the tune of $6-7 trillion. Now you might assume that, you know what, this is not coming out to be, if we add this and this, it does not come out to be exactly 31 trillion, because this data is slightly outdated. This is for June of 2021. As of today, the US dollar debt is $31 trillion. So roughly you can do the math. Now the first major change that will happen is that this part of the pyramid, this specific thing, is going to collapse immediately. Why is that the case? Because if the US dollar or the US debt bubble bursts, so to say, US government says that, you know what, we will not be able to service our debt. What does that mean? Okay, so let's work through an example. So let's say that you have taken a home loan and aapki EMI ban rahi hai 1.5 lakhs every month. You say that, you know what, bank, I'm not able to pay this debt. Kar lo jo karna hai, right? So what will the bank do? Bank will come and probably auction your house after giving you a few notices. And whatever money the bank makes, who will keep it? The bank will keep it. So they have auctioned the house for which you were previously paying the EMI. So that is the mechanics. Now here, if the US government defaults on the debt, so what is the US government doing? So basically US government gave out the promise that, hey, if you buy our bond, that if you give us $100 today, then within like 5 years, we will end up paying you, let's say $120. Now the US government is telling you after 3 years that, you know what, no, we can't do that. We cannot even pay you any interest, vagera vagera, we are going to default. So what is it that you are going to do? You cannot do anything. You cannot go and tell them that, you know what, we will take hold of your tijori and auction it and this, that. No, nothing of that sort can happen. All simply is going to happen is that the US government will lose trust, and US as a sovereign nation will lose trust. Now, what is the implication of losing that trust? Well, all this stuff, so all the saving bond market is going to collapse, because think about it this way, that the US government keeps on issuing bonds. Today they will issue a bond, they will say कि अच्छा आप हमें $100 दे दो, and after 5 years we are going to pay you $120. Now these type of bonds would also have been issued back in the past. In the future also, these type of bonds will be issued. So will the US government be able to issue such bonds very easily? The answer is probably no, it will not be very easy, because once you default on the promise, people will always look at you with suspicion. So that is the issue that will arise. And immediately the impact of this would be reflected in the bond market. So the US bond market is made up of $51.3 trillion. Now that is the total value of the US bond market. This bond market is going to suffer a massive collapse. It's not as if that this $51.3 trillion will immediately become zero, but a lot of the value is going to get lost. For example, the total value right now stands at $51.3 trillion. It will get cut in half, or whatever that number comes out to be. So there is going to be a massive impact on the US debt or bond market that is going to seep over across other nations. For example, if you consider China, so China has a bond market size of $21 trillion. If you consider India, it has a size of 1.5 approximately trillion dollars. Similarly, other countries also have their bond markets. Now the interesting part is, and take a look at this graphic, what you will notice is that a lot of money by these foreign countries are held in US dollar term. वो उनके reserve में पड़े होंगे. It might be there in the form of borrowings. So this entire issue of the US debt collapse will reflect across the board in different countries. So that is the first key implication of the US debt going bonkers, that nothing will remain. That's the part one of the equation. Now part two of the equation is something that will directly hit you. Now how exactly? So think about it this way, that what is the bond market used for? Well, the bond market is used for raising money. For whom? Who raises money? Well, it could be corporates. So that is the first layer that raises money. For example, you would have noticed that Adani ji has taken a lot of debt. Similarly, Vedanta has taken a lot of debt. So these are corporates who function on bond market also. So वो bond market से भी पैसा उठाते हैं. Second is the government. Government keeps on saying highway बनाना है, road बनानी है, this, that. Okay, they charge tax also and they do bond financing also. So these two parties that engage in capital intensive businesses are going to suffer a lot. And if you have your money invested indirectly in these capital extensive businesses, or you have purchased government bonds, the value of these businesses will collapse like anything. So this is the direct implication here. A larger implication of all this is the credit flow in the economy. Credit flow. So what is the meaning of credit flow? Credit flow simply means that if $1 trillion are moving through the Indian economy, then because of credit crunch situation, the US ka debt market has collapsed, that 1 trillion will become like $0.5 trillion literally overnight, so to say. So people who want to raise money, people who want to do debt financing, startups trying to raise money, they will all suffer. So to make up for that, you will see a lot of firing happen. So this is the first broader aspect as to what a US debt collapse will look like. So now let's move on to point number 2, which is that the inflation is going to go up in the US economy like crazy. For that, let me bring the case study of Sri Lanka, and this is the entire graphic of the inflation situation in Sri Lanka. So you can see that the inflation in Sri Lanka used to be 6-7%. Then it suddenly, after like 2022, it spiked to like 40% and even like 70%, right? So just from like 6-7%, 70%, which is like absolute crazy. And then it started to come down. So very interesting questions कि भाई यहाँ पे क्यों था, right? Part 1, then it rose so much and then it started to come down. So what exactly happened? Can you tell the backstory? So very quickly, very interesting economic discussion here, and let me draw the flowchart and explain that first and foremost, there are debt concerns on a country. For example, Sri Lanka was extremely leveraged. In 2023, people are debating, yeah, US is extremely leveraged. Will it be able to repay its loan? Vagera, vagera, debt ceiling nahi badi to kya hoga? So these are debt concerns. This leads to what? This leads to lack of trust in currency. Now for countries like Sri Lanka, Pakistan, people always think that these are weak economies. कभी भी कुछ भी हो सकता है, right? So what they do is that during these debt concern phases, their currency gets devalued. What is the meaning here? It simply means that the buying power of Sri Lankan rupee or Pakistani rupee goes down quite aggressively. So that is called as devaluing the currency. Now, when the currency goes down in value, what is it that the government will have to do? People will start doing try कि भाई पैसे ही नहीं है. everything is going up in prices, this, that. So what does the government do in the short term? They print a lot of money. Now, this is the same thing that even the Argentinian government is doing right now. That there is so much inflation problem in Argentina already, a lot of debt concerns and all that stuff. But the Argentinian government in the short term mein dekh lete hain. So they end up printing a lot of pesos. So same thing Sri Lanka also did. And here is a graphic to prove it, that last year, Sri Lanka became the #1 country in Asia to print like crazy amount of money. Now, what does that lead to? The more money you print and weaker your economy is, it will lead to higher inflation. Inflation means price increases at a massive pace. That the supply of money is too high compared to supply of goods. Now, what does all this lead to? It leads to a complete collapse in a way of the economy, something that happened in Sri Lanka, that it eventually had to default on its debt. Then what happens? That once a country defaults on its debt, well, then it enters a debt renegotiation phase. For example, Sri Lanka went to IMF कि भाई पैसा दे दो हमें, debt renegotiate कर लो. Pakistan what? पहुंच गए, right? Okay, give us like money, give us this, give us that, right? So that is called as debt renegotiation stage. Once this is successfully completed and the worst, so to say, is over, then the inflation starts to cool off a little bit. So that is the entire roadmap. Now, the interesting part is that in US's case, US is already the apex currency in the world. For example, 60% of forex reserves in the world are held in US dollar. That is the dominance of the US dollar. Now, will this roadmap in the US work exactly the same, the way it had happened in Sri Lanka? The short answer is no, it will not happen that way. Why? Because who will renegotiate US's debt if they enter this stage? Well, no one, because it's like very, very difficult to renegotiate it. Almost a large chunk of the debt is held by the US itself. So are they going to renegotiate the debt with themselves? The answer is no, that is not going to be possible. Some external debt might get renegotiated. For example, Japan or China, they might say, अच्छा ठीक है बाद में देना कुछ नहीं होता, right? So ले जाओ पैसे थोड़े दिन के लिए. But meanwhile, the economy will still have to pay the price in the form of what? In the form of high inflation. So that is still going to exist. That is not going to go away. Why is that the case? Simply because of the fact that the US dollar itself will get devalued. Now, why will the US dollar get devalued? Simple terms, that the US government and US as a sovereign nation will lose a lot of faith from investors. So investors अभी तक सोचते थे कि अच्छा यार, world, any problem happen, we are going to put our money in the US dollar. It's the safest currency in the world. Now what is going to happen is that if the US government itself defaults, then investors will scratch their head that, okay, what's the point of giving US the money? So we will not buy the US dollar or invest in the US dollar. So what is that leading to? Well, that is leading to selling of the US dollar, not a buying of the US dollar. Whenever that happens, that leads to a currency devaluation, and therefore the buying power of the US dollar will fall, and it is very, very likely that some printing of money will again happen in the short term to prevent that situation, and that will lead to inflation. Now comes the third impact of a US debt collapse, which is the flight to safety. This is a very interesting topic. I was researching more about it, and there is a lot of contrary commentary on it, but it's a good economic thought process here. So I'll walk you through it. It might look a little bit contrarian. So hear it with an open mind. See, what happens is that during high risk periods in the world, a lot of money flows from emerging economies to stable economies. For example, in 2021, when Russia-Ukraine war was climaxing, a lot of money flew from emerging economies like India into the US. Now, if the US itself collapses or the US debt situation becomes worse, where is the flight to safety? That is the central question that people are pondering. So one of the economic arguments is that, see, in the short term, the US dollar itself will become that flight of safety. And in the short term, the US dollar will get strengthened. Do I believe in that argument? I personally do not, but this is what other people are saying. So maybe true, maybe not true. You let me know your opinions. So that is one viewpoint that people are thinking. So that led me to think that, okay, what are assets of safety as of now? So one would be the commodity play, that a lot of countries might want to shift their money to commodities. For example, Russia and China have been buying a lot of gold. Other countries might also prefer to do the same. Now, can that be done at a national level, at a very large scale? The short answer seems to be a no. And this is a reference article. Please go and read it. You will understand more. I will also give the link to the complete article. So what it basically says is that, see, it is not possible for countries to buy so much of commodities at such a massive scale at which the current US systems exist and US dollar exists. They can't just simply replace the US dollar with commodities. It's just impossible to do it. Had that been the case, then countries like Russia and China would have already done it. And this argument has merit. But for an investor, for example, you and I have how much money we would have? We would not have like crazy amount of money. So for us, taking escape in these commodities might be a better approach. So that's one. Second, you need to think about that what kind of payment structures might come. So my argument is that gold-backed stable coins could become an alternate source of currency trading at a national or international level. Now, why gold-backed stable coins? Well, the answer there is very simple, that cryptocurrencies already have that function and network. I'm not trying to promote cryptocurrencies, nothing of that sort. I'm just helping you understand the technology. So that's one. Second is that it does not give any particular country power over the other. For example, right now, India might think that, hey, we are the apex nation, we should replace the US dollar. Same might happen for China, same might happen for Russia. How do you get all these three parties to collaborate together? Answer is gold, right? So gold could be like a stable form of currency. But how do you trade in gold? You can't like pick gold and give it to someone and transfer it. It's a nightmare, right? And therefore the world moved to fiat standard. But you can create a stable coin around it with certain mathematics around it. If this can be worked upon, then this is a very good short-term solution. Now then comes the fourth impact, which is that the countries will hold less of US dollars going forward. Now it's not as if that if the US defaults on its debt, everything will be sold immediately. No, that will take time. Countries will cut off their reserves in US dollar. They will slowly decrease it because there will be no counter buyers of US dollar on the other end. It will become like a junk bond, so to say. And if it becomes junk, then all the US dollar just vanishes in thin air out of the entire world. So that is not going to happen. What is going to happen is that imagine that if one US dollar has 100 units of buying power right now, then immediately after default, it will move to 50 units. As the countries start cutting their US dollar reserve, it will move to like 30 units, then 20 units, so on and so forth. So there will be a slow decay of the US dollar. Meanwhile, what is going to happen? So again, I will show you the article here again, that countries like Russia and China are thinking about using cryptocurrencies with gold as the underlying and build a stable coin on it. So that is what they are planning to do. Will they be successful? Will they not be successful? That's a topic for an entire video. But the first key aspect is that the major trading nations of the world need to agree on their de-dollarization strategy. If that can't be done, then we are looking at a really dark phase, which could be a potential massive downside where the world could head. That if an alternate to de-dollarization could not be agreed to, then the fifth impact would come into play, which is a Great Depression-like situation. Now, one of the primary problems during the Great Depression, for people who do not know what Great Depression was, so it was a period in the world during the end of 1920s, that when the world had just witnessed like World War I, it was a period of economic degrowth. During that phase of Great Depression, the world grew only at 1% GDP growth, which is like really bad. On top of that, there was massive unemployment, industries were crushed, even the world trade started to happen less and less. So to cut the long story short, it was an economic degrowth period. Something similar is going to happen this time if the de-dollarization debate is not settled very, very soon and the major trading partners of the world do not come together and figure out a very quick alternate. It is given that the world is moving towards de-dollarization. The world does not really trust the US per se. They have to do it as of now because they have no alternate. And this alternate needs to be built fairly quickly. If the US debt collapse happened before the world reaches a consensus on what a de-dollarized world would look like, then it will be a period of really slow growth. World trade will halt. A lot of unemployment problem will happen. A lot of industries are going to get crushed. It will be exactly or very similar to a Great Depression-like situation. Can you still build wealth? That's a very interesting question during these times. So a lot of people were able to build wealth during the Great Depression period also. How were they able to do it? So these were people with cash. Now they will find different models and very complicated answers to it. But these people held a lot of cash and they bought a lot of assets at massive or mega discounts. Now this is the Warren Buffett model. So what Warren Buffett, at least in the earlier part of his career, used to do was that he used to buy companies absolutely cheap. For example, he'll find an insurance company that is on the verge of bankruptcy. He will go and buy that company at a massive discount, wait for it, turn it around, and then sell it at a higher price. So that is the model that has been executed by a lot of people during the Great Depression time. And these were the only people who got rich. So as an investor, is that a good time to make money? yeah, maybe it is not ethically or morally correct, but that is the business side of it. So I'm just explaining it to you. So anyways, before we end the video, you must understand the debt situation. That is it a very likely scenario that the US government is going to default on its debt? The short answer is no, because over the last 65 odd years, the US debt ceiling has been raised by 78 times. So very likely that it will be risen this time also. Number two, that even if their political parties do not agree that nahi badhane wale hum debt for whatever reasons, then also the US president has certain tools at his disposal and he can bypass the Congress. So that is what the US lawmakers are telling us, that there are mechanics to overcome this situation. So very likely that this situation is not going to blow up, and already the news in the market right now seems to be that this situation is going to get resolved. But this is a great opportunity for the world to prepare for the fact that one day US is going to default probably on its debt. What are you going to do then? So probably the world should start taking on some actions. And in case you want to learn the basics of the US debt and how that will impact the world, how exactly is US exporting financial terrorism to the world, here is a video that I have done. Please go and watch it, and I will see you soon.